talk about it more later. I'm sure it'll bring up more questions. One of them was the doctors investing and doctors being required to give up their investment if they didn't in a certain number of cases. Another one was doctors being able to buy more if what the government thought was that, from the emails, was that if doctors could only buy additional amounts if they were doing cases. So that's gone. Everyone who wants to buy, in the same boat, everybody can buy. Another issue that came up was that they didn't push on was these oral contracts, or unsigned contracts, which they certainly could have gone, and they did not. So we need to have a signed contract. Another issue, but the big issue that they talked about was the using of the doctors. And so the question is, what can you do to stop the doctors from being involved? Because I know that on the one hand, you can say don't be involved, and then you still have the doctors, Dr. Big Mouth, who wants to be part of the show. And so what do you foresee as some of the issues in that?
The number of the doctors are involved in surgery centers too, ownership of surgery centers, and on boards whereby they are asked to, get a religious contact. So they have not only ownership from, United, but then their own ownership in a surgery center, and that surgery center has only so many. I mean, they're all owners really in a way that are negotiating contracts for the most part.
Right, now the surgery centers pose a little bit of a different issue, but you still can have kickbacks in the surgery centers because what you worry about is that the surgery center is going to give the doctor the litho contract, so the doctor will continue to bring his or her surgical cases there. So the question is whether they are doing anything. We don't, there's a limit to how much you can know, but I think you have to be a little, you look at those carefully, but they are a little different than the hospitals. I mean, if they're on the board and everybody knows, the question is, are they taking something on that's more? Here, let's stop back first. Are you doing Medicare litho in surgery centers?
Yes, you can.
We've started to.
You started. Mm-hmm. So then, it's a then we're back to Medicare, and you still have to worry. You got to worry about what they're doing, and you got to find out what's their involvement. Are they the ones are they pressuring them to take their company over somebody else's? Are they threatening to leave? I mean, they can't do those things. We're going to have a letter. It's required by the CIA to send a letter to all the doctors telling them about the compliance, and we're going to talk about that in there. And I think that do people have meetings with the doctors at all? Are there any meetings?
Yes. Oh yeah.
So there are going to have to be discussions with the doctors about them. Because what they have to understand is that when this investigation went on, there were 4 doctors who also got subpoenas from the government, who had to provide their emails and who were asked to be questioned by the government. They all had lawyers, they all had to come in, and they could have been prosecuted. In the end, what they did in the CIA, in the settlement, was that the United companies paid the money. And the United companies were settled. They were the ones who were deemed to be settled, 3 companies. But if you look at the settlement agreement, what they did is there was a release of all of the individuals, not by name, but by category. So all the managers of the companies, all of the office of directors, all of the investors, everybody got a release from prosecution. Now, why would we care about getting that release? Because they could have been prosecuted. So we were careful to get a release for everybody. So they need to understand that they could be prosecuted individually. It's not just the company. It's the salespeople. It's the owners of the company. It's the investors. It's the doctors who did it. Anybody who was involved can be prosecuted. So they need to understand that this is serious business. And that if they are pressuring people to take something to take a contract that for more than they could get otherwise, if they're threatening to move patients, that they can be prosecuted.
Mary, the hospital can come to us and say, if you don't give us this, we're going somewhere else. They can ultimately pressure us.
The hospital, what do you mean?
They can say, if you don't give us what we want, we'll find someone else.
Yeah.
Okay, they can do it.
Yes, because what they're going to say is, it depends what they're going to say. They can't say, if you don't buy, I don't know, a car for the administrator, or you don't, if you don't support, if you don't make a $10,000 contribution to our building fund, they can't do that. That's a kickback. Okay, that is a kickback. So they can't say anything, but they can say to you, if you don't give it to us at X amount of dollars, if you don't promise that you'll be here, 3 days a week, if you don't promise you're going to give us Monday morning, yeah, that's just a negotiation of a contract. They're entitled to look for the service they want. They're going to, presumably they want a high quality service. Presumably they want somebody to show up. Presumably, they might want somebody who, that they can require that you come. They can require that you're available. Some want, available on 24 hours notice. You'll come for an emergency. Some want, certain days a week. Those are all business negotiations that make sense in negotiating a contract, and that's fine. Just as, one of the things that you market to them is, look, well, we'll provide. You may get somebody else at the same price, but are you really getting the same thing? We always come. We don't have, maybe we don't charge a minimum, whatever. Those are just service. Those are service things. That's different than saying, I want some kind of a payment in cash or in kind, or saying, I'm going to bring patients or I'll take patients away. It's reasonable for them to have contract terms. I mean, that makes sense.
Are surgery centers allowed to tell their doctor partners that you got to do 13 cases or 15 cases here, or you have to sell your stock in the company? Can surgery centers do that?
Surgery centers can do the following. The government does, when the government wants something, it does something that it may not do otherwise. The government likes surgery centers because surgery centers are cheaper than hospitals, right? So the government wanted to encourage surgery centers. So we have not talked about this, but there are exceptions to the Stark Law, but there were called safe harbors in the anti-kickback statute. You don't have to meet a safe harbor, but if you meet a safe harbor, then they can't prosecute under the anti-kickback statute. So they put in a safe harbor under the anti-kickback statute for investments by doctors in ambulatory surgical centers. And if they meet, in a safe harbor, you must meet every one of the requirements or it doesn't work. And my guess is that probably 95% or more of the surgery centers don't meet the safe harbor because they usually have something. So it's almost always something, usually with management or whatever. When the owners can't provide services there, for example, they won't meet the safe harbor. But in the safe harbor, if it's a single specialty ASC, then to meet the safe harbor, I think it's 1/3 of all of of each investor's practice income has to come from services that can be performed in an ASC. They don't have to be performed in that ASC, but they can be performed in an ASC. And then if you have a multi-specialty surgery center, then I think it's also that 1/3 of all of the cases are done in that center. So the idea is it's supposed to be an extension of their office practice, and that's what they claim and all this, but they have all these reasons why they do it, but the reality is the reason they do it is because they like surgery centers better because they're cheaper. But the problem is if they don't meet, but I don't think that they can have they could, if they really met the safe harbor, then they could say we're only going to have investors who meet the safe harbor, and if you don't meet the safe harbor, you have to be out. But other than that, I don't think they can. And as I said, most surgery centers don't meet the safe harbor. So it's doubtful that they can. I'm not saying they don't do it. I will tell you that a lot of people who do things, and I wonder, what are they doing? But no. And people say to me, I know that people think, how will I get caught? Well, we know one way you get caught is a competitor. Another way you get caught are disgruntled employees. People say to me, I do transactional work also, so where people are buying a healthcare company, and we'll see they got a whistleblower suit, and they know about it, but it hasn't gotten anywhere yet. And they'll say to me, you know, but it's just a disgruntled employee. Well, you know what? You can be a disgruntled employee and have a valid claim. So, you know, that's how it happens. You never know when something is going to happen. They find people in all kinds of places. So, you know, depends on whether people do things that I don't know why they do them, but they do them. But we're not going to do them. Because Julie and you two guys are not going to want to sign the certificates, okay? Unless you know that things are okay. More questions? I like the questions because there's more things than I can think of. Must be some more questions. What was I saying before we got to that?
How we got here.
Yes. All right. So the big thing is doctors and doctor investment, and not having the doctors involved. And I know that it's going to be a challenge to you. If you need help, then let us know. And the reality is that just as I say that you can lose a lot of contracts before you get to $7.3 million, you can lose a lot of investors before you get to $7.3 million also. So sometimes what you have is a doctor who's just a bad person, and you don't want to have him invest. I mean, you know, we have other companies, you know, where I'll talk to them, something will come up with a doctor, and I'll say, you really want to deal with this person? You know, every once in a while they're a pain in the neck, and then they turn out to be fine. But usually, if there's something funny about them when you're talking to them, they're going to be giant pains in the neck all along the way. And some people are just not worth having as investors. You're better off not having them there. And so there's sometimes hard decisions to make. You don't want to walk away from a contract. You don't want to walk away from an investor. But if you have somebody who's, you know, who wants to be paid for their referrals and they can't do that, then you may not just want them.
Is that a reason to buy them out though now? I mean, getting perspective once is one thing, but
You can't buy not because they ask bad questions. You just have to tell them, you know, we can't answer it. Just, you know, the old Nancy Reagan, just say no. You can't tell them. Yeah.
So we have a surgery center in Rockford that the administrator is a doctor, but he's not a non-practicing doctor.
Mm-hmm.
How does that apply? He's a role as an administrator. He can obviously be involved in a negotiation.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, it's only people who can refer.
Right.
Only if they're a referral source. So if they're not a referral source, then it doesn't matter. Yeah. It's only referral sources that we're worried about. But you know, on the doctors, you know, it's hard to manage these doctors. I know it's a little like herding cats. They all have egos. You know, and I will tell you that one of the things I've told people in things that in companies have smaller companies, you know, when they worry about referrals, I tell them, you know, if you were the kind of person who, when you were sitting at the dinner table and your brother got 6 French fries and you only got 4, then this isn't for you, because things don't come out evenly. They're just not going to come out evenly. You know, if for nothing else, some people get more lithotripsy patients in a year than others. You know, I mean, you know, they don't roll out in nice even numbers, do they? You know, they get more, they get fewer. It just happens that way. Some people work harder, some people work less. You know, somebody is an investor and is decided to use some other service, you know, but they're still keeping their investment. Well, it doesn't work out even. Luckily, though, you have such a big company. You know, how many investors now? How many doctors?
180.
Yeah,
Huh?
380.
With 380 doctors, you know, it kind of evens out. You know, maybe you got 1 or 2 or a few that, you know, aren't, you know, referring anymore. But basically it evens out. And basically, you know, people are, you know, are part of the company, care about the company, use it when they have patients who need the service. And, you know, I think that it's going to be, it's another piece of salesmanship, or salespersonship, to have them understand that things can't be done that way, and that it's not only is the way it's going to be, but it's in their benefit to do it. More questions? More? Oh, how are we doing on timing?
We're like 1 minute over.
Okay, good, we're stopping.
That's our cushion.
All right, right here, this is my great slide. Lunch.